Hi everyone, and welcome to the Scrap and Create YouTube channel. This is Christine here, and I am here today for part 2 of the making of my Ladies Diary mini album. So I will link you below in the description box of this video to the walkthrough of this album so you can see the whole thing. And I will also link you to part 1 of the video tutorial on how to put this album together. If you've already watched part 1, then you have created the 7 by 9 inch book with me. We have done the inside covers, we've done the binding, and we've also created all 4 of our pages, our base pocket pages, which are right here. Now remember, if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I did mention at the end of that video that some people like to go ahead and put their pages into their books before adhering the flaps and pockets. I like to leave mine out, so that's why mine are not in my book yet, but that's a personal choice and completely up to you. But the way I'm going to be doing this today is I'm going to be working with the pages out of the book until all of the flaps and pockets are adhered, and then we can go ahead and put everything in the book. So let's just go ahead and get started. I have a cut list for you in the description box of this video below. So as I go through the measurements here on camera, you don't have to take notes or anything like that. You can just refer to the description box of the video. And we're going to just go methodically through the book. We're going to start with the inside front cover and then work our way all the way through the rest of the book. Alrighty, so for the only time we will be working inside the book for this video is for the inside front cover and the back cover, and then when we adhere the actual pages to the book. So let's begin with the inside front cover. I have already gone ahead and pre-cut, scored, and taped all of the elements that we're going to be needing, but I will go through with you everything that I have here, okay? So this is for the inside front cover. And let me just bring over the finished album quickly so you can see. It's very simple. The inside front cover simply has this pocket here and then this little flap for photographs. Alrighty, so these are just photo mats that you can stick in any of the pockets. So the front cover inside front cover is very, very simple. The measurements for the inside front cover are as follows. You will need a pocket, so that's going to measure 7 7/8 by 4. You're going to score on the 7 7/8 side at 1/2 inch on each end, and on the 4-inch side at 1/2 inch. Okay, you are going to want to, of course, adhere your score tape to 3 sides. I like to use 3/8 of an inch score tape. It's perfect for the 1/2 inch score lines that I give myself, and you can purchase the score tape at Scrap and Create. And then the last thing that I did is I used an old Martha Stewart border punch to create this fun little design at the top of my pocket. I believe that this border punch is retired, but there are plenty of other deeper border punches that you could use in place of this. Your measurements would be the same. Also, if you decide not to use a border punch and you just want a straight pocket, your measurement will still be the same. The only difference would be the designer paper, which will be when we get to video 3 where I decorate the album, part 3 of the tutorials. You would just have to measure accordingly, and you would slightly differ your design paper from the measurements that I have with this punch. So what I've done is I've punched all the way across the top of the pocket. However, when you fold this, right, it's going to look really weird with this decoration behind. Can you guys see how weird that looks right there? So what I do, and I've already pre-done this on all of the other pockets, but I wanted to show you on this first pocket here how to deal with that. So I go ahead and fold on my 2 side score lines, and then I just take a pair of scissors and I cut along the score line here, cutting off this top part of the doily punch, and then I come over from the right and just cut there. So I have now just left this whole side blank. And so then when we adhere this to the book, you won't have that funny looking design behind it, if that makes, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to give it a nice little trim. So we're just cutting until we get to where this little subsection crosses here, and then we cut over. And now we have removed that little extra piece. And now I'll show you how we adhere this down to the book in just a moment. The first thing that we want to do though is we want to adhere that inside flap. So this flap measures 7 inches by 6.5 inches. You score on the 7-inch side at 1/2 inch. Apply your score tape to that 1/2 inch flap. Grab your little bone folder and always burnish your tape. And then, you know, give it a fold back. Make sure that your fold is nice and burnished. And this flap is just going to go right about here. All right, we want to make sure that it's above our pocket. Actually, it really honestly doesn't matter. You can actually have it underneath a little bit of the pocket if you like. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get this placed wherever you like here. Make sure you don't go over into the crease here where the book folds. Do you see what I'm saying? So you want to stay where the cover ends, is right where you want to line this flap up. So let's go ahead and just remove, I'm going to turn the book this way. I think it'll be a little bit easier. And let's just remove a little tiny bit of the score tape backing. So I just have it a little bit removed. I folded it back and I'm just eyeballing this because I'm not really worried about it being perfectly in the center. If you are worried about that, you could certainly make some little tick marks with a ruler and your pencil. But I'm fairly decent at eyeballing, and so I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball it and stick it down. Now I have some wiggle room on this left side here, and then when I've got it placed right, I just remove the rest of the backing and then burnish this down. This is going to serve as sort of a little undercut page so that when our book opens, that's sort of the first thing we're going to see. Now we can go ahead and adhere our pocket down on top of this. Alrighty. Now the way that I do the pockets is, of course, you fold on all of your score lines and burnish. So you have those nice creases where your score is going to be. Also, you're burnishing that tape down as well. Then you need to miter the corners of your pockets, because if we fold our pocket like this, it's going to be real thick and chunky here in this corner, and that's just going to add bulk to our book, and we don't want that. So go ahead and where these two score lines meet, you have two score lines that meet on the bottom corners of your pocket piece. And where they meet, they form a little X or a triangle, if you want to think of it that way. And you're just going to cut right along that triangle. Does that make sense? I'm going to do it on this side as well. And I'll be doing this on all of our pockets today, so hopefully it will make sense. You can obviously discard these scraps. So now when you fold this, there's no bulk, and you have a really nice corner of your pockets. If you find that maybe you didn't cut enough, like on this side right here, this pocket looks a little funny, right? Because I've got this little bit of excess hanging off. So all you need to do is just grab your scissors again, and I'm gonna fold it back and just cut that little tiny bit off. Now I'm gonna have a nice clean corner for my pocket. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and remove the backing of the long side of the pocket. Now, before I remove the backings of the sides, I'm not going to remove them all the way until it's time to actually decorate the album, and I'll tell you why. Once we set this down, we're still going to want to have design paper coming down into the pocket so that we can get that pretty design paper inside the pocket so it will show behind our pretty design. Even if you're doing a straight edge to your pocket without the design punch, you're still going to want to do this way so you can fit a little bit of design paper down in the pocket, and therefore that will make it a nice transition between the design paper on your inside cover and your pocket. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tear off just a little bit of the backing of the score tape on either side of the pocket, just a little bit. And I'm just using this little tool to help me tear the score tape. You certainly don't need a tool. You could just tear it with your fingers, use a ruler, whatever you like. So see how I've only torn off just a little bit and I've left this backing on. Once we get to part 3 of this tutorial series where I decorate the album, you'll be able to see you know, how I finish the decorating part, remove this tape, and also we'll be adding a little bit of glue to the top decorative part on each side as well, but that will come in part 3. So now it's time to simply line our pocket up along the bottom of our book here. I like to just line mine up with the cover that we've placed inside. Remember, we covered the chipboard and stuff with this inside cover in part 1 of the video tutorial series. So that's where I like to kind of place my little pocket. Alrighty, and so just line it up and then stick it down. And remember, it's gonna be a little funny looking because we haven't stuck it down all the way, and that's intentional. Alrighty, because we want to put that designer paper in. And that'll make more sense, of course, when we get to part 3 and start decorating. Alright, so there's our inside front cover. We've got the pocket and then this sweet little flap here for pictures and decorations. Okay, so let's go ahead and close up our book now, and we are going to move to the actual pages. All right, so you can set your book aside for now if you haven't adhered your pages inside your book like me. If your pages are inside your book, then obviously you want to be working with the book. So we're going to start now with page 1, and I have my little notes to the side here. So page 1 is going to consist, I will bring the finished album over. Page 1 here is going to consist, it's very simple, of a long flap here and a smaller side flap here and a pocket. Now I want to make clear that the flaps and pockets and basically all of the design elements for this album were specifically designed for this particular paper collection. This is kind of an unusual size here that I wouldn't normally do in just any album, but I wanted to do it in this album because I just thought this was a beautiful artistic image. So that's why the flaps are the way that they are. You could certainly customize this to any paper collection that you're working with, or just do standard 4x6, 3x4, or 4x4, you know, flaps. But I'm showing you the way that I made this one for this paper collection. So that's why if you're wondering why sometimes the sizes are a little bit weird, it's to accommodate the beautiful images in this paper collection. All right? Okay, so the first part here of page 1, we have a couple elements here. We have those 2 flaps that I showed you, and then we also have our large pocket. Let's go ahead and do our top flap first, and that is that long flap that we had that's going to accommodate that beautiful piece of designer paper. This flap measures 3 1/4 by 7 1/2. On the 7 1/2 inch side, you score at 1/2 inch. Okay, and then of course you apply your 3/8 inch score tape and fold on your score line, give it a nice burnish. And now we just want this sort of a little left of center, so about here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove a little bit of the backing of the score tape, and then I'm going to flip this upside down. I just find that sometimes helps me get better, you know, better view, especially with the camera, so my head doesn't get in the camera. Alrighty, so left of center, but you're not all the way up against the edge of the book, but you're getting kind of close. So we're just going to go left of center here with this flap. Once I get it exactly where I want it and it's nice and straight across the top, I just pull off the rest of the backing of that score tape and then stick it all the way down and give it a nice little burnish. All right, so this is our first flap here. And as you can see, we're slightly, you know, left of center. We're not right up against that edge of that book, but we're fairly close. Next, we're going to do our right flap, and that is going to measure, grab it here. This is going to measure 4 3/4 by 2 5/8. And on the 4 3/4 side, you're going to score at 1/2 inch. Again, all of these measurements are for you down below in the description box of this video. And I'm going to place this about here. So no exact measurement on where I'm placing the flaps. I obviously don't want it too low because I don't want it to interfere with my pocket. I'm just going for what looks visually appealing to me. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this way. I'm going to peel off the backing of the score tape just a little bit, flip it back over, and I'm going to put mine about right here. And so once I've got it stuck down, on this corner, I have wiggle room on the left here. Get it right where I want it, peel off the rest of that score tape backing, and there we go. Okay, and so this is so far what we have. We have this little long flap and then this flap. All right, so that's what that's going to look like. Finally, we want to go ahead and adhere our pocket. Our pocket is going to measure 7 1/2 by 4 1/2. On the 7.5 inch side, you score at 1/2 inch and 7 inch, and on the 4 inch side, you score at 1/2 inch. Then if you're using a punch, you're gonna punch along the top. You're gonna cut over, like I showed you with the inside front cover, apply your score tape, and then of course we're gonna be folding on all of our flaps here, all of our score lines, and also burnishing that tape down. And then we need to miter the corners of our pockets just like we did for that inside front cover. And that just means you're cutting this little on this diagonal here where these two score lines meet, you're just drawing an imaginary line with your scissors and cutting. All right, so I'm just gonna snip that like so. And then we're gonna snip this one like so. I always like to just sort of close it and check it, make sure I don't need to trim anymore and that it looks good. Looks like I didn't trim close enough on this side, so I'm just gonna go back and trim it again. No big deal. Then we'll try again. Yep, that fixed it. And now we have a very nice pocket. Alrighty, so we're gonna do the same thing that we did for the inside front cover. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the entirety of the backing of the long side that's gonna go on the bottom of the book, or of the page rather. And then I'm just going to remove a little bit of the score tape on either side. So just a little bit. And so you're leaving that backing on for part of that side, each of the short ends of the pocket. And then we simply line this pocket up along the bottom, get it nice and lined up, and then we'll stick it down when we have it where we want it. And then when we go to decorate, just like I mentioned with the inside front cover pocket, when we go to decorate by leaving that backing of that score tape on, I don't like that. I'm going to fix this real quick here. We have room to actually maneuver that design paper to go down into our pocket a little bit so we have a nice designed look to our pockets. All right, sorry for having to rip that up. I just didn't have it quite as straight as I wanted it. Okay, so now we can go ahead and burnish this down. And again, it's open on purpose. All right, and that's to accommodate the design paper. Sometimes I find that maybe I didn't trim when I'm using the punch that excess off quite as good as I should have. So maybe I didn't get it right up against the score line. So I'm just gonna grab some smaller scissors and finish trimming that. That will be evident once you adhere it to the book. But you can see the score line, and I can see, probably can't see it on camera, but I can see that I didn't trim right up against the score line like I should have. So I'm just fixing that really quick here. There we go. Okay, and so this is what page 1 is going to look like. Alrighty, now we do have some magnet placement that we're going to need to do. I recommend using the basic gray magnets. They are sold in 2 different sizes, and they are sold at Scrap and Create. And in my humble opinion, they are the best on the market. They're strong, and they also are self-adhering, so you don't have to use tape to adhere them. Unfortunately, I have run out of those. So I always have sort of some in bulk that I get from Amazon on hand just for that very purpose. So I'm gonna have to be using those today for this tutorial, but I really do recommend the basic gray magnets. I think that they're the best. Now, magnets is an entirely personal preference, all right? This page really does stay nice and contained, especially if you give good burnishes on those flaps. So you really, just as a matter of course of general mini book album making, it's really your personal choice most of the time when it comes to magnets and using them or not using them. You could also use different things like ribbon or other items for closures as well. I personally like my book all neat and tidy and everything kind of closed up. So I like to use magnets or other closures. I just find it, for me personally, that's my style. So I'm going to show you what I did, but again, it's completely and totally optional. So I'm going to be using 4 magnets on this page, and because I don't have the basic gray, I have to put some tape down, all right? So I'm going to put a little bit of tape. Let's start with this small flap. I'm just going to put some tape right there. I'm going to peel off the backing of the tape, and I'm going to grab a magnet, and I'm going to stick it to that tape. I'm going to now grab another magnet, and I am going to stick it to the magnet. So in other words, make sure that you have the magnets mated up correctly. You know, they have a positive and a negative, and one side doesn't work and the other side does. So if I can get the magnets apart, see, this is why you really want to go with a basic gray. These are a little awkward to use. You know, they're fine, they get the job done, but they are just bulk from Amazon and they're not the best. There we go. All right. So now I'm just going to find its mate like that, and then I'm going to add another piece of score tape on top of that second magnet. Okay, so now I have them sitting on top of each other with this piece of score tape, which I am now going to remove the backing of and then stick it down and then peel it back up. And now we have our magnets exactly where we want them. I'm going to cover up that sticky tape by just placing another piece of tape over top of it. And then when it comes time to decorate the book, you'll remove this. This just helps keep those magnets in place, and also so you don't tear your cardstock. So now that flap is nice and adhered down. For this flap, I don't want to put it in the pocket because it just barely goes over the pocket, so it's really not going to be very effective. If you just had a straight pocket and not a decorative pocket, you could easily put your magnets on this pocket here. But I'm going to go ahead and put mine up here a little ways, so just above the pocket. So I'm just going to put a little piece of tape, peel off the backing, grab a magnet, or try to grab a magnet. Alrighty, and stick that to the tape. Grab a second magnet, mate it up to this magnet, grab a second piece of tape, I put it the opposite direction over the second magnet, peel the backing off, stick the flap down to adhere that magnet to the flap. So now you have your magnet placed exactly where you want it, so they will meet up perfectly on the flap and on the base page. Then I just grab more tape and stick it over top of the magnet. Again, you'll remove this score tape backing when you put down your designer paper. So now this sticks, and see, that's not going anywhere. So again, not necessary for this particular page, just something that I like to do, but again, not necessary to use magnets for this particular page. Let's flip this over now, and let's go on to page 2. All right. For page 2, let me just flip my notes over here so I give you the right measurements. And let me bring over the finished book so you can kind of see where we're going. Page 2 has this fun little envelope look to it. You have a little short side here, and this was my idea to just enjoy this beautiful paper. And then I have a spread inside for photos. So you basically have these two flaps and a pocket for this particular page design, okay? So let's go ahead and start with the right flap. And again, I've pre-cut, scored, and taped everything just to save time. I thought it might be a little wary watching me, you know, cut everything, tape everything, you know, punch everything and that sort of thing. So this is the right side, which is the short little flap that's sort of like the lid, if you will, of the envelope, the top flap of an envelope. You can think of it that way. You want to cut this at 4 by 8.5, and on the 4-inch side, score it 1/2 inch, and then apply your 3/8 of an inch score tape. Now, if you don't have 3/8 inch score tape, a 1/4 inch will work. 1/2 inch will be too large. And by the way, I should have mentioned this at the very beginning. When you're applying your score tape, make sure that you do not go over the score line. So you see how I have it here, like up towards the top, and none of it is coming over the score line. Okay, that's just probably, you guys probably already know that, but I just wanted to make sure I said it, because again, I'm hoping that beginners and people of all different crafting levels will be able to complete this album with me. I did corner the little edges of the top flap here, so I'm just using, this is actually an old Creative Memories corner rounder, but of course there's so many on the market now. This just happens to be what I have, but I just, you know, rounded the little corners there just like that. Okay, and now what we want to do is just line this up on this far right side of page 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a tiny little bit of the backing of the score tape off, and I'm going to turn the page this way, making sure that I have it in the right direction, and I'm just going to lay this down, get it nice and lined up with the left, or the right rather, side of this pocket page. All right, now let's see here. Okay, so once I have it nice and lined up, what I want to do, not Still not quite how I like it. See, this is why I only tear off just a little bit of the tape backing at first, because that way I have wiggle room and I can fix it if I need to. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now we can go ahead and tear off the rest of the backing here. All right, and then just give it a nice little burnish. So this will open like so. If you ever find that you're a little bit over, if you ever find that perhaps you have just a little bit of paper extending beyond the edge of the page, it's probably a paper trimmer issue. All you would need to do is just trim it slightly if that bothers you, okay? So now let's go ahead and do the left flap. So remember, this is gonna close like so, and this will close like so. All right, so it's gonna be like almost like a little side envelope. So what you wanna do, of course, is burnish this one. Now this flap measures, this is our left flap, and this measures 6 by 8.5, and on the 6-inch side, you score it 1/2 inch. Apply your score tape, give it a nice burnish. And then again, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna take off just a little bit of the backing and fold it outwards. And now we're just lining this up with the left side of this base page. Let me just make sure I'm on camera here. All right, and now we're just going to, and again, I've only put a little bit off, pulled a little bit of that backing off so I can make sure that I get this nice and straight, because we want it straight across the top, the bottom, and the side. I'm also gonna bring this down so I can make sure that the lid, if you will, of the envelope, the flap of the envelope lines up nicely with this other flap. This is looking nice, so I'm gonna go ahead and tear off the rest of the backing and then go ahead and burnish that down. So here we have our cute little envelope, side envelope. And the last thing we need to do now is to go ahead and adhere the inside pocket to the inside of the base page. Remember, this is the base page, okay? So what we need to do now is go ahead, I've already done my pocket. It's 7.5 by 4 inches. On the 7.5 inch side, you score it 1/2 inch and 6.5 and 7 inches, I'm sorry. And on the 4 inch side, you score it 1/2 inch. Apply your score tape. Of course, do your punching if you like. I can already see I didn't cut this one perfectly on the score line here up top. So I'm going to fix that, and hopefully I won't have to fix it when I get it adhered, since I'm already seeing that I made that mistake. All right, let's go ahead and fold on our score lines. And then you see we have this little X here, just like we have done for all of our pockets. We got to miter the corners of our pockets, all right? So let's go ahead and miter and miter. Go ahead and throw those scraps away. And then I'm going to remove the backing of the middle. This time I'm just going to do it a little bit. I'm going to show you the same kind of technique we've been doing with the flaps, just to help get our pockets right in place. I'm just going to remove a little bit of the sides, remember, for when we're doing the designer paper at the end. And that's going to stay that way. We are going to end up removing all of this right now, but not the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. We know we need to line this pocket up right along the bottom here of this base page. We have 2 score lines on the left and on the right for these flaps, and we want to make sure that our pocket doesn't go over those, because if it does, then these aren't going to close properly. So by removing just a little bit of the backing of the score tape, we can kind of move this around a little bit until we get this pocket exactly where we want it, so it doesn't interfere with those folds. That looks really good, so I'm going to tear off the rest of the backing and go ahead and shut it, or stick it down. And now this is page 2. So we have our pocket, again, left open on purpose. We will get to that, to closing the pocket up firmly when we decorate. And then we have our side envelope. Now, I have 6 magnets that I used on this. You could use a ribbon closure. I do recommend a closure of some kind. You could certainly use a little swivel closure, any kind of closure that you want. Because my idea for this album was to make sure I had plenty of room to view the beautiful artistic paper. What I'm going to do is just use magnets for this flap. But again, that is your personal preference, however you want to do it. I'm going to use 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put them here first, and then we'll put them on the lid of the envelope. All right, so again, because I'm out of the basic gray, I got to put my own tape down. So I'm just going to go ahead and put 3 little things of tape. Just make sure you're not putting any over the decorative part of the envelope. Probably doesn't matter because we're on this flap, but for design purposes, I don't want extra bulk right there. So that's why I chose to do it that way. All right, now we need to grab some more magnets. I'm just going to take a chunk of them off here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and peel off the backings of the score tape that I've laid down here. And then I'm going to place the 3 magnets down. 1. Here's the second one, and here's the third. Then I'm going to grab 3 more magnets and make sure that they are appropriately matched up with the magnet that's already stuck down. Again, these are fussy. They're a little tricky to work with. The basic gray ones are not. And I wish I wasn't out of them, but I am because I've been making lots of projects lately. Okay, there we go. All right. So now that we have these stuck, so now we have the pairs together, we're going to take a little bit of tape and we're going to go the opposite way on each of the 3 little magnet clusters. Alrighty. So we've got those. And now we're just going to peel the backings of this off, which can be a little tricky. Just got to work with that score tape a little bit. All right, then you simply close this top flap of your envelope or your side envelope, and then you lift it up, and hopefully those magnets follow, and yes, they all did. How awesome is that? So now we have all of our magnets in the perfect placement where we want them. So I'm just going to grab score tape now and cover all of these up. Again, when it comes time to decorate the album, we will remove this score tape backing. But I like doing it this way because it keeps the magnets in place. They're not going anywhere. And also, we don't rip our cardstock by having it open stickiness or anything like that. But I like having 2 different pieces of score tape, one on the base of the magnet and then one on top. It really keeps those magnets in place. So now you can hear that little click, and this is nice and secure and is not going anywhere. So this is page 1 with the 2 little flaps in the pocket, and then here is page 2. All right. Okay, so this is our first page element. So there are 8 pages in this album, but there are 4 base pages, right? So this is the first base page, which gives us page 1 and 2. So now we can set this aside, and it's time to move on to our second base page, which is actually page 3 and page 4. So don't get confused by this page 2. I'm actually going to go ahead and erase it. And I'm going to put page 3 and page 4 on the back. But when we were doing the part 1 tutorial, we were counting the base units when we made these. Now we need to count the individual pages. I hope that makes sense. So 4 page units, 4 pocket pages, 4 base pages, whatever you want to call them, gives you 8 actual pages. And then you also have the inside, front, and back covers. Okay? All right, so let's move on now to page 3. Page 3 is a little bit more complicated. Not hard, there's just a few more moving pieces to it. So let me show you in the finished book quickly here what page 3 looks like. So we start and we have this flap on this side with these 2 mini flaps. Again, the flaps are based on this paper collection. Normally I wouldn't have, a flap this little, but I really thought it was cute with this paper collection. So that's why we have some of these really standardized flaps and pockets for this particular album. So we have these little flaps and pocket, and then this opens, and we have these little flaps over here, okay? And then this whole thing opens, and we have this spread here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is attach this flap to the base page, and then we will build it from there. So just hang with me. This is not hard, just like I said, a lot of moving pieces. Okay, so go ahead and grab your second base page, and we will begin with page 3. So let's start with that right flap. The right flap, let's see, I've got lots of moving pieces here. Give me just a second. Just want to make sure I have them all I should have labeled them, but I did not. I just pre-cut them all, but I didn't label which piece was which. So let me just, okay, here we go. All right, this is our right flap right here. And this is what's gonna go like this to help open this page up. And there's gonna be another one, all right? But this one will start small, okay? This one is 5 3/4 by 8 1/2. On the 5 3/4 side, you score at 1/2 inch. Apply your score tape, give it a nice burnish, and then we are simply lining this up with the right side of this page, of this base page, all right? And I do my flip outs, just a little tip. I might have small flaps or something on the side of the page that's next to the binding, but I'm not gonna have large ones like we're doing here. So if you're doing large flip outs, make sure it's on the side of the page that's not right up against the binding. Does that make sense? Otherwise, it's just not gonna flip out right. Okay, so let's go ahead now. I've only taken off just a little bit of the backing of the score tape, and we want to get this nice and flush against this right side of our page, base page. All right, so I've got that stuck down, and now what I need to do is pull the rest of the backing off and stick it down. Okay, there we go. Give it a nice little burnish. So now this will flip open. All right, next thing that we want to do is we have another flap. And that is this flap right here. And it's gonna go right here. And this flap is, let me just double check this measurement. 5 3/4 by 8 1/2. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I had written it down correctly. So it's the same size as this one. So it's 5 3/4 by 8 1/2. On the 5 3/4 side, we're gonna score at 1/2 inch. Alrighty? And we're gonna put that right up against the right side of this new flap that we have just made. So I'm gonna turn it this way, make sure I'm still on camera here, and then we're gonna, give your score line a nice burnish and burnish that tape down. Okay. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna peel off just a little bit of the backing of the score tape, and then we want to get this nice and flush up against this edge of this new flap that we made, okay? So I'm gonna get it nice and stuck down, get it right where I want it, and then we'll remove the rest of the backing of the score tape. Okay. Now, right here on this little flap, we have two little small 3x4-ish flaps. Again, these are all customized to this paper collection, so they're not necessarily how I would do most albums, so keep that in mind. But these little flaps measure 3 1/2 by 4, and on the 3 1/2 side you score at 1/2 inch, and you need 2 of these. Let me just make sure I have grabbed the right pieces. Yep, 3 1/2 by 4, 3 1/2 by 4. On the 3 1/2 inch side you score at 1/2 inch for both of these, and then these are just going to go along the right side. Make sure that your flap is closed. Okay, so this is what we have. This is our base page. Let me just make sure I'm explaining this correctly. This is our base page. Always make sure when you're constructing your book, by the way, that you keep the pocket open. So don't adhere anything in here. I'm not telling you to, but sometimes mistakes happen. So just make sure that that's always clear. So flip open. We just adhered this flap. This was the first flap that we did. Close the second flap that we just did, and that's where we're gonna put these little tiny 3x4-ish. They're not quite 3x4 when they're folded, but that's where we're gonna put these little guys right here. All right, so one's gonna go here and one's gonna go here, and I'm just gonna eyeball this. I know it's about 1/4 inch from the top and from the bottom, and that'll give me a little space in between. So I'm just gonna go ahead and eyeball it. You can certainly measure if you like. I'm gonna take just a little bit of the backing off. Again, I like to do this because I just feel a little bit more comfortable. It gives me a little bit more time before I'm committed to sticking that tape down. All right, so I have maybe not quite 1/4 inch, maybe closer to 1/8 inch from the top. Pull the backing off, go ahead and burnish that. And then we're gonna do the same thing right here. And again, it's gonna be about 1/8 inch from the bottom. So we're doing the same thing. Tear a little bit of that backing off. and about 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, just like so. Okay. Yep, that looks really good. Looks how I want it. Tear off the backing. Okay, so now these little guys will flip out from this flap. All right, and now we close this whole flap. Right, so here's our base page. Here's these little guys. Here's this flap. Here, this was flap number 1, flap number 2, mini flap 3 and 4, if you want to count it like that. And then when you close the whole thing, you have this, and this is what faces you when you're looking at the page. So this is this. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've got these 2 little flaps and a pocket to put on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that quickly here. This, let's see, this top flap is, let me see here. Nope, not that one. Just a minute, let me just, okay, right, we have it done. Okay, I see where I'm getting confused. Okay, so on this one, we have a top flap, which is 4.5 by 3, and let me just find that little piece. I believe it's this one. Yep, 4.5 by 3. And this is, again, our left top flap. It's gonna go about here. And then we have this little mini one here where I did the little cutout of the cute little car. Again, this is very customized to this paper collection. You could certainly use the general flap idea, like the larger flaps, and then customize for your paper collection or your needs the littler flaps if you like. All right? So let's go ahead, and again, I'm just gonna eyeball these. There's no exact measurement for these, just one's gonna go up. I'm gonna turn the paper upside down, or the page upside down, so I can see a little bit better. But this is gonna be left of center, and just a little bit over, but flush with the top of the page, okay? So that's gonna be a little flap there. And then this little car flap, it's so cute, is it's 3 3/4 by 1 3/4, and on the 3 3/4 side, I've scored it 1/2 inch. And again, obviously, this is very customized to this particular paper collection. Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily need this for a different collection, but it does make a cute little journaling spot too, I thought. So I want mine to go slightly underneath this flap, so I'm going to put it about here, get it nice and lined up. Tear off the rest of the backing of the score tape, give it a nice little burnish. Okay, so those are those 2 little flaps, and now we have our pocket. The pocket for this little flap, oops, measures, all right, 6 1/4 by 3 3/4. On the 6 1/4 side, you measure it 1/2 inch on each side, and at the 3 3/4 side, you measure it 1/2 inch as well. Go ahead and do your punching of your punch, and then adhere your score tape. We will be mitering. We need to miter the corners of these pockets here quickly. So go ahead and grab your scissors. I like to turn it over to the bumpy side where I've scored. I can just kind of see where those score lines meet a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and just snip those off. Throw the scraps away here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold on all of these score lines and give it a nice burnish, and then I'm going to, for right this second, just slightly remove a little bit of the long side. We'll remove the whole thing in a moment. And then on these short sides, I am going to just remove a little bit, just like we've been doing for all of the pockets. And again, that's just for when we get to decorating the book. That'll let us get some design paper down into that pocket, and it'll just look more complete design, like a more complete design. All right, let's go ahead now, and we want to adhere this pocket flush with the bottom of this flap. Make sure it goes all the way to flush to the right. So you want it to be flush to the right and flush along the bottom of this flap that we created. That looks really good. I'm surprised I did that well on the first try. All right, go ahead and burnish it down. So now this is what we have so far. We have a little flap pocket. Close those up. We have these 2 little flaps, and then this large flap here. We have a large flap here, a large flap here. This is going to be a nice big spread for you for photos. And then I'm going to take a short break now, and we will finish the base page. We're gonna put a pocket on the base page and a couple flaps, and then we will be done with page 3 and we'll move on to page 4. All right, guys, I'll be back in just a little bit. Thanks, bye.